The Warwick debates refers to a series of 3 speeches given by Anthony Smith and Ernest Gellner about their disagreement over how to best understand nationalism. The first 2 speeches were given in 1995, and the third one was a year later after Professor Gellner's death, and it reflects on his contributions to the field. Starting with Anthony Smith. Smith compares the modernist theory with his own approach, which he calls ethnosymbolism. For this presentation, I'll be drawing on points from both of Smith's speeches. So, starting out with some basic differences. Modernist theory is a reaction to primordialism and perennialism. It stresses the importance of modern processes in the emergence of nations. For example, Gellner talks a lot about industrialization, Benedict Anderson talks about print capitalism, etc. It holds that nations are recent phenomena and homogeneity is enforced through different forms of socialization. Gellner believes that the invention of national high culture is related to the elimination of pre-modern cultures. So now ethnosymbolism. In turn, ethnosymbolism is a reaction to modernism. It stresses the importance of symbols, myths, values, traditions. Smith agrees that nations are recent, but his approach is more historically oriented and draws on things from a long time ago. It looks at how external forces help to crystallize ethnic identities. Here, national culture is a transformation of pre-modern cultures, both high and low. Smith finds the modernist theory insufficient in several key ways. First, there's a high level of abstraction. Basically, he thinks that there are too many differences between nations to make any general theory, and this forces modernists to be kind of vague and abstract. He also finds that modernist theory doesn't really explain why specific nations emerge and are so important to many people. For example, why some people are willing to die for their nation. Looking at nationalism as a product of modernization also minimizes the significance of ethnic and cultural ties. To sum it up, Smith thinks that Gellner's view that the nation is the product of conditions like industrialization only tells half the story, while his approach tells the other half. So how does it do this? The advantages of his theory include the fact that ethnosymbolism is an approach rather than a theory. This avoids the problem of having to come up with one theory that fits all situations. It also offers insight on whether and how a community will transform into a nation, because it makes parallels between similar cases. It also does full justice to the role of memories, values, myths, and symbols. This is filling a gap in modernist theory. Finally, it offers an explanation as to why nationalism is so popular. The intelligentsia may lead the way, but the people respond because of vernacular mobilization of the masses. Now moving on to Ernest Gellner. In his response, Gellner argued that the historical and cultural background in the ethnosymbolist approach isn't actually necessary or relevant. As evidence, he describes nations like Estonia, that he says were the product of modernist processes, but nevertheless developed a vibrant culture. He also says that looking for continuity with agrarian societies isn't useful because they had completely different cultures and aims. The role of culture in an agrarian society was to place people within an established and stable hierarchy. Gellner says nothing from this time really applies to contemporary issues. In contrast, the role of culture in modern societies was totally transformed by the economic and scientific changes of the 17th century. Modern society has no stable structure. Another point that Gellner makes is that the modern man is automatically a nationalist, because there is congruence between the culture in which he is operating and the culture of the surrounding economic, political, and educational bureaucracies. In Gellner's opinion, not only is ethnosymbolism encumbered by irrelevant information, but it also leads you to create a fictitious past, one that actually isn't real. Gellner disagrees that ethnosymbolism offers insight into the fate of potential nations. Prediction actually isn't necessary in modernist theory, but Gellner does mention a few factors that can give an indication about where a potential nation might be headed. This includes size and compactness, continuity, although this actually isn't essential, and the presence of symbolism and motivation. So here we have our 2 approaches, modernist theory and ethnosymbolism. Both of these can be used in research. If you're taking the modernist route, it would be important to take note of modern processes and what kind of responses or movements they triggered. Following Gellner's lead, you could figure out when a nation became industrialized, when and if, I should say, and then compare the society before and after that period. Or if you're using a Smithsonian ethnosymbolist approach, look for ways in which the society's roots are relevant in its modern national identity. There's a lot of room here for interdisciplinary perspectives. For example, you can investigate the role of archaeology and history as a scientific field in shaping collective memory. To finish off, our group would like to offer 3 questions that follow from this debate. First, Gellner's structural approach leaves out the specificity of particular cases of nationalism, and the ethnosymbolist approach avoids general conclusions highlighting the difference between particular nationalisms. Which of these is more relevant in the post-industrial world? 2, is there a serious contradiction between the structural and the ethnosymbolist approaches? And 3, some nation-states happen to be cross-cultural and mixed, according to Smith's categorization of nationalism types. Which one of these 2 approaches would be more useful in analyzing cases like this? Thank you very much for your attention.